By no means am I looking for an over-ripeness. I don't go after that pruny character because I do want the acidity in the grapes to come forth as well.
There's a juiciness to it, there's a floral aspect, and then there's a lot of pepper in it, which is totally crazy to think that you can taste all that in a grape, but it really expresses itself when it becomes wine as well. And then usually that plum characteristic is always present right when I'm about to pick.
And it has to be very releasable in the skins. And you can actually, with your own eyes, you can see and feel the color, the anthocyanins that are in this grape skins.
Now I'm looking to see the color extract, so that's a good indication I'm gonna have a good color year.
And if those are giving and the flavors are there, and the seeds are matured, which is another critical part.
Color of the seeds is where you find full maturity of a grape.
Those seeds get brown and you look at it and you just know.
Brown seeds, I'm looking for a little less of the pulp sticking to it.
Another indicator of ripeness is just how the tissues are evolving, the still gelatin coat around the seeds. And as the seeds ripen, they change color.
How did we get all those ones that tasted like stewed vegetables? It's because the interior of that grape was not developed enough.
Those seeds have to mature to a sort of a nutty crunchiness versus a green, harsh tannin.
Hitting this kind of balance point where you're at this full ripeness where you can really kind of chew down on the skins and the seeds and not be left with anything green or bitter, and then trying to translate that through into the finished wines.
When all of those three factors fall into place, healthy fruit, the release of color, and the ripeness of the fruit and the seeds itself is when I decide to pick.
Nice and nutty, really good.
Almost there, about a week away.
That decision is the most difficult one that I make. The one that I lose sleep over more than anything else is it time? Could I have gotten another day, or did I go too, you're trying to go as far as you can without going too far?
You're most connected to the ground at that point, and the decision that you're about to make will impact what you're gonna have in the bottle.
The great winemaker, wine grower dichotomy comes up immediately at that point, because we really don't want to take up that little piece of land and pick it in 10 picks.
No.
But over here, can't you do it in 2?
Right, exactly.
No.
No, no.
You can't just pick in broad swaths. We pick in these little micro batches. This kind of vineyard is, it's part of our soul. We connected with this land in a very personal way to get a sense of where the ripeness starts, the slower ripening section.
You see the differences as you walk through a vineyard from one side to the other, or variations in the topography. What I taste in the vineyard translates into the wine at the end.
It really is fundamentally the flavor of the grapes that transforms into the wine. If the grapes don't taste good, the wine won't, right? So the limit of quality of any wine is the fruit that it comes from.
And so wine is a shadow of the vineyard. The year's been mostly warm, one of the better years we've had in quite a few. So we've got a little more dehydration than we might normally have.
That's because this is such a dry location. And that's what makes our wines so distinctive in terms of the intensity of flavors and aromas, because these skins are so thick. They're packed with flavor and aromatic chemicals.
We've got great tannins, great color. The flavors are really popped. That perfect ripe tomato, that perfect ripe apple, that perfect ripe cherry, well, it's the perfect ripe grape. Grapes for wine are sometimes a little wrinkly. They're not the most beautiful thing, but they taste beautiful, and that's what we're after. Most winemakers have this experience during harvest that we're walking through the vineyard, tasting fruit and thinking, have I forgotten what ripe fruit tastes like? Have I forgotten what it's like? This doesn't seem right to me, but it's been, the timing, things look about right. And then 2 days later, the fruit changes. Oh, of course, that's what I'm waiting for. Now we're there, now it's time to pick. It's good, it's really good.
Really good.
We've had great weather for the last 2 weeks. We've been able to hang it as long as we wanted. You can see the canopy starting to turn yellow. It's fall. It's really started to come on to us, and it's time to bring the grapes in.
Ramon. do you think? Are they ready?
Ready to go. It's harvest. I've decided to pick. So I call the vineyard manager, get me a crew or 2 crews. We can get so many tons off that day. It'll be delivered to the winery by 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. You know, the point rows at the north end of H that we're going to leave for later, let's take those now. That's the perfect life of a winemaker. I'm standing in one vineyard talking to a vineyard manager about another pick that's going on. This happens again and again. We pick most of our vineyards, because many of them are hillside vineyards you can't run machines through, by hand. A man can pick about a ton of fruit in about 6 hours, depending on the vineyard. It's the hardest work that you could possibly imagine. I've done it. It's a beast. They do it fast, and they do it clean. I have great respect for the people who do that work.
Once you've made that picking decision, there's really not a whole lot that you can add to it, but there's a whole lot that you can lose from not treating the fruit properly.
There's always a bunch of leaf matter in the picks, so we try to get as much of that out as early as we can, because as soon as these dry leaves go through the distemper, they just get obliterated into a million little pieces. And then everything else we still put that through the sorting table, but as much as we can do now is probably helpful.
When you bring the fruit in, you really want to see that it's given all of the attention that you can give it. So we take every care to make sure that we destem it and handle the fruit properly and get it into tank as softly as possible.
I use what's called custom crush wineries, so I don't have my own winery where I bring fruit to. I bring fruit to a winery whose business it is to crush my wine or someone else's wine, that sort of thing. So I arrive at the winery with the fruit, and the fruit gets processed. So we have forklifts to pick them up and dump them out, lay the fruit out. There's people who are picking out any extra leaves that might have gotten through.
You can see the ladies and Tim sorting right there, and the berries just sort of travel along that table. Anything that's smaller than the grates in the bottom of the table falls through as waste. Anything that's blown off from the air knife that we have at the very end of the table also gets thrown into a waste bin.
In the wine business, they call it mold, material other than grapes.
snakes, beer cans, all kinds of fun stuff.
The then perfect-looking little blueberries fall down into the sump and the auger right there and get pumped through up into a tank.
We become almost obsessive in all the little minutiae of details that can influence the way we destem it, the way we handle the fruit coming in, temperatures, the fermentation process.
If it's white wine, it gets thrown direct to press, so the whole clusters get dumped into a press, and it's a great big machine with a balloon inside that presses against the grapes and squeezes the juice out. Simple as that. That gets run down to a tank, maybe to barrels, and fermented and becomes white wine.
So we brought in some Pinot Gris grapes this morning from Oak Knoll district, and we're using a technique called whole cluster fermentation. So what we've got the intern team doing here is they're foot stomping the grapes, meaning we're going to leave all the stems and everything in there during the fermentation. You get more tannins from the stems, and you get a little bit of potassium, so it changes your pH and changes your mouthfeel, and we're just trying to make kind of an interesting component here for a blend of ours. So after we're finished here with the stomping in a minute, we're going to basically take these bins and transfer them to either fermentation bins or one of these beautiful Cacio Pesto terracotta tanks that we have.
What I've got here are we're taking out and stuff we're leaving in. It's only the best fruit makes it to the tank. And I'm Justin Harper.
Yeah, and with 13, especially with Sumri and I being able to get on the sorting line for the first time and being able to physically at the end affect every single grape that's going into that final process, it's the culmination of all those walks up and down this hill. And I think you just smile. You have to be happy about it. Otherwise, you couldn't do it because you're farming.
Yeah. This is fresh fruit that came in day before yesterday. It's still just juice sitting in the bins. The next step will be to take them out of this cold room, let it warm up a little bit, and we'll actually inoculate with yeast. And that yeast will convert the sugar in the grapes into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The CO2 just goes off into the air, be picked up by the plants for next year's wine. The alcohol stays in the wine, and that's one of the reasons why we drink wine.
Red wine made with red grapes most red grapes have clear juice.
If I wanted to make a white wine from Merlot, I would, rather than run it through the crusher and stick it in a big vat and let it soak on its skins, I would throw it in the press and press that juice away from those skins the same day it was picked. The juice would be gray, clear, lighter than Chardonnay. So Blanc de Noir, the sparkling wine, or Champagne, is Pinot Noir, but it's white. From the same grapes that are in this bin, I make a rosé. And you can see that the flesh of the grape is clear. I pick the fruit, goes into a press. It sits for a couple of hours, gets slightly pink. We press it off. That gets fermented without the skins. Stays pink, goes to the bottle pink. That same fruit, 2 to 3 weeks in this bin, will come out dark red. And this will make a delicious, medium-bodied red wine. So this is Merlot that's been fermenting. It's out in the sunshine to warm up. It was in the cold. I want to get this fermentation going, get it up into the 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So out in the sunshine today, beautiful day in Napa Valley, and want to get some heat going on. So here we are, berries. The CO2 from the yeast is pushing the berries up, forming a cap. And so they'll come through and push that cap back into the wine, get that color, tannin, flavor out of the skins. And so they come and do that 2, maybe 3 times a day, depending on where you are in the fermentation. There are some wineries that call this method à l'ancienne, the ancient method, which is punch it down by hand. We're almost through fermentation, but it'll keep pushing this cap up the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, and we'll wait till it falls in, until the cap drops, is what we say in the industry. And I'm here to make sure it smells good and see how it tastes along the way. This is a tank of Hidden Ridge Cabernet Sauvignon. It's just started fermentation. It's been in here about 6 days. It's gonna change the temperature settings. It's pretty cool right now, 68 degrees. It's just getting going. These are set up with an automatic pump overs. Here you can see there's a little air pump. Open this valve, the wine runs through, pumps over the top through an irrigator, just like a punch down. We did it by hand in the bins, but with a irrigator device on top. Again, get that juice over those dark skins, get the flavor come out. When you get into like diabetic shock drinking these, they're very sweet, very ripe. It's about 25% sugar, a little more than 25% sugar. So it's pancake syrup, we call it, and then we'll get going, fermenting, turning that sugar into alcohol. That's the thing about the process is when it comes to the winery, well, it doesn't suddenly transmogrify into something else. It just translates into the flavors that are in the wine. So right now I'm getting blackberry. There's like a red cassis, red raspberry. And it's about halfway to being wine. Right now, the acidity is a little higher than it will be at the end because most red wine goes through a malolactic fermentation. It softens the acid, so the acid is a little popped, a little high right now. That will come down, balance out, but tannins aren't overboard. Flavors are brilliant. You can see this one's quite a bit foamier coming out. The yeast are working away, and the heat of that fermentation is taking the color and flavor out of the skins. Is it clean? Is it happy? And this is very happy. There goes 20 bucks. This one's done fermenting. It's wine, but the wine is still sitting on the grapes and still trying to get more texture, flavor, tannin out of these. It'll probably be here for another week or 2, based completely on how it tastes. And my view is it's not quite done yet.
The next biggest decision after your picking decision is when to press. That's the final step where you say, okay, we've taken everything we can out of the skins. There's nowhere else this wine's gonna go that's gonna make it better. And that's when we'll make that pressing decision.
Pressing off is all about palate, it's tasting. So once something is on extended maceration, I'm tasting it every other day. Trying to find that balance of tannins and seed tannin and all of it until I feel like it's a complete wine, and that dictates my pressing decision.
How hard and how long determine the quality of the juice that comes out of the press.
When you're free running it and you're pressing it, I mean, you're just taking it off the side and just...
And you basically, you stand at the press and you taste for the change.
Right.
And you watch when the flavors change in the juice. But there was a point where you say, free run, it's gonna get a little bit richer, Right. Stop.
Right.
Done, because I was getting too tannic. I mean, it was standing there the whole time. That's what our day is watching the press.
We're here today pressing off a tank of our 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon from the estate. This is a basket press, so it's basically a very high-tech replica of an old school basket press to where these used to be cranked down by hand with a screw press. This is a hydraulic basket press. So you've got a motor powering the piston that pushes this plate down and just squeezes all of the last good wine out of the skins for us. This process is basically the last step of harvest. The wines have completely fermented, so it's no longer grape juice. It's rich, unctuous Cabernet. What we do is we drain off all the wine out of the tanks, and then we throw all the grape skins into this basket here and press it out. So what I do at this stage is I make sure it smells good, and then we taste it. And we typically spit it out because we're doing this all day long. So what we're tasting for is the tannins in the mouthfeel and see how this wine is really shaping out because it is so young, but it's important at this stage to really pay attention while pressing so you don't press it too hard and over-extract some of the drying tannins to make sure that you have a nice balanced wine. The free run is pretty soft. It's got a lot of nice kind of rounded tannins, but this press wine just has all the heart and soul. It's got all the mid palate and all the finish.
When we're making the Chardonnay, we have both the free run and the light press as one fraction and about 20% as hard press. It's been a separate creature its entire life, from the day of press into its tank, into its own barrels.
So this is all hard press?
Yeah, you want some of the hard press because it has some of these richer qualities to it, and a change in palate. So we'll look at blending some of this back into our main piece to add more texture. Exactly, absolutely, backbone.
And that's when you can really get all of those beautiful just tannin and structure that you're hoping for.
And actually softness and roundness, it actually ends up being rounder and richer than the more pure mineral-driven free run.
It's a pretty small part of the final blend, but it makes a huge difference.
This wine makes me happy. I like this barrel. Yeah.
We'd be happy. We'd be very happy.
And once we've finally made that pricing decision, it's not like we go on vacation or we walk away. We barrel it down as quick as we can, and we really try to make sure that we protect the wine as much as possible.
So I use cooperage as an element of complexity and spice.
I'm a true believer that the barrel is a vehicle of maturity. By no means do I use it as a vehicle of flavor.
It really just depends on the tannin structure and the tannin development that I actually get.
That is what's going to be taming your tannin. That's what's going to be bringing your wine into complexity and aging it.
So that neutral oak actually tames it down a little bit and allows for that bright fruit to actually show through.
For our fruit, oak shouldn't be central. It just supports the fruit.
There's an evolution that happens. You bring flavor out of the barrels into the wine. Been in this barrel now for a couple of months. So within a week, they start to change.
Sure. Your wood, your alcohol, your extraction, everything over time as it ages has to go in parallel. And I go back to a vehicle of maturity. When When a barrel is brand new, the pores of the barrels are very open, very fresh.
For my Howe Mountain wines, they all get 100% new French oak because the tannins can actually hold, and I actually think it softens the seed tannins that come out of the wine.
You know, those caramelized sugars are available from the bending of the wood and the bending of the barrel, they're available. But more importantly is that breathing of that virgin wood. Where an older barrel, pores of the barrels have already been sort of clogged with the solids and the tartrates of the wine. So the breathability is a lot less.
What I've been working at is really fine-tuning, you know, what works best with the fruit of each block.
Back to the whole point of being a balance. And so you have that more massive wine, you need more input from all the other characters in the oak.
We get to bottling, still preserving all of those magical things that we were able to taste in the vineyards and taste in the fermenters and translate all of that to that end product.
2013 was a absolutely remarkable vintage in that we had really brilliant weather, modest crop loads.
It was a very, very dry summer and dry growing season.
The beginning of the drought cycle, so that the vines were still in balance, but fighting for the growth.
We love drought conditions. Drought conditions give us small berries, a lot of concentration.
The yields were high enough to be commercially viable, but low enough to concentrate flavors for quality.
Our yields in the vineyard were slightly down, which also typically means that the quality is going to be up.
And I think we knew early on, just even in tasting the fruit, that 13 was going to be pretty special in terms of intensity and tannin structure.
More definition, more detail, more freshness, more.
And you made a comment to me with 2013 fruit that may be the best fruit you've tasted in, I think you chose it on well over a decade, back before 2004.
Yes.
The quality of the fruit in 13 was undeniable.
"2013 to us was one of those years that neurotic Ronnie didn't have to be calling Tim, what about the rain? What about the this? Because in the early years, neurotic's a good word.
We had perfect weather conditions in that season. We weren't driven by any pressures at the harvest.
I mean, even the 11, when the storm came in and lasted for 2 weeks, and, you know, all of the wineries were out here crushing for 24/7, and everybody was fighting over space, and it was horrible. So to see 13 come in and kind of let everybody relax.
The pace was a perfect pace for winemakers, and I think they did an extremely good job of mastering that.
All through harvest, I'm watching the weather, saying there's a huge storm coming in 7 days. The end of harvest will be when that storm comes, but it never came.
People were holding their breath because it was just too good to be true.
Rain is the enemy at the wrong time, and it just didn't rain.
We just kept pushing it out and pushing it out based on it's getting better, it's tasting better.
This Goldilocks year, I've heard people call it, because it wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold.
It was perfect. You know, somebody related it to an easy bake oven as a vintage. It's hot at the right time, it's cool at the right time, it rains when it's supposed to, it's dry when it's supposed to. And you can literally pick whenever you want to.
It let us make the decision the way we really wanted to make those decisions. And that's a fairly rare thing, truly.
And whenever you're given the chance for the grapes to have a nice, mellow, even ripening season, I believe that you get more balance and more texture, more complexity into the grapes itself.
We were able to bring in this beautiful harvest with incredible uniform ripeness.
And by being able to let the fruit hang without fear of raisining or crop failure, we really were able to let the fruit get as ripe as we needed it to, wanted it to.
To have the ability to really call your pick and decide, you know, based on flavor and based on history in this vineyard and based on the end goal, I'm gonna pick it.
You, as the vintner, winemaker, get to make those decisions as opposed to Mother Nature basically making your decisions for you.
We really were able to say, now I want it.
It made bad wine in 2013. Look in the mirror. Nobody's fault but your own.